All right, it looks like it's setting up. We might be live. Let's just double check this.
Okay.
I always like to double check.
Smart.
Make
Good
sure.
job.
If you guys are jumping on live, go ahead and say hello to us. If you are watching the replay, hashtag replay. Okay, we are all good to go. So I am really excited to have this conversation because as we were talking about prior to hitting record, it feels like a taboo topic. And yet it's one of those things that us women are kind of curious about, right? We want to have this conversation and we want to know, are these things normal? Are they not normal? What's going on? So I have with me Sheela, and she is the sex expert. And she's gonna be sharing with us all the things that we as women are curious about. So why don't you just take a few seconds to introduce yourself, tell us what you do for work, why you got here, and why you're so passionate about talking about this.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much. This is so great to be here. I'm really excited about tonight. I love talking about sex, so this is great. Yeah, so my name is Sheela Zelmer, and I am a women's health physiotherapist. So I'm in Canada. We call ourselves physiotherapists. I think physical therapists are what they're called in the States.
Yeah.
But as a women's health physiotherapist, I deal with everything below the waist. So that is bladder issues, prolapse, having a baby, but also things like painful intercourse, dryness, tightness, having difficulty having an orgasm, and low libido. So that's kind of everything that I deal with. And I totally agree with what you were saying, because I think women are often, we're curious, and yet we're embarrassed at the same time. We want to know if what we're experiencing is just like everybody else, and maybe we'll talk to our girlfriends, but we don't have access to great health information. Like maybe we Google things, or maybe we ask our doctor and they're equally embarrassed to talk about it. And so we don't really have anywhere to go for answers. So I love working with women because we can have honest conversations and we can talk about things and there's no TMI. So it's good. It's great.
Yes, I am trying to share this to your community right now. I don't know if it's going to let me, but one of the things that I want to ask you about is this mindset, or is this more of a physiological thing, or are they together, right? Is there one that leads the charge?
Well, I think they are both interrelated. Like, I don't think we can separate our mind from our body. We are mind body beings. So our thoughts influence the way our body responds, and our body then influences the way we think. And so it goes around in a circle. And so when we think about libido, oftentimes we think about it being, I'm just not in the mood, as a very matter of fact thing, but it can be for many reasons. It can be because physically, whether it's from a hormonal reason, maybe we've recently had a baby, maybe our hormones are not balanced, maybe we're going through menopause, that we don't have the right sex hormones feeding the right tissues to make us get in the mood. But also, if we're overtired and we're overstressed, sex is going to be the last thing on our mind. So both of them are interrelated. So I don't think you can separate one from the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely agree. And one of the things that I found so interesting, and maybe you can speak into this, is the connection between when we're overstressed. So right now, what we have kind of going on with COVID and things like that, like I hear a lot of these women just really struggling to get into that mood. And so can you maybe speak into the stress part and how that plays a role in all of this?
For sure. So stress is a huge female sex hormone thief. So if we just talk about it from a physical standpoint, when we are overstressed, when we are not sleeping well, when we are constantly on a revved cycle, our body is not going to be making the necessary beneficial female sex hormones that are responsible for giving us some of that libido and arousal, but also for the physical sensations, for getting wet, for things being engorged, being able to orgasm, all of that type of stuff. But not only that, stress is also responsible for physical sensations, right? Like, so we feel more tense, we are not able to relax, and all of those things are responsible, have to happen in order for us to get aroused. If we are too tense body wide, we're not going to start getting aroused. So even sensations like stimulation that normally feels good, if we are too tense, it's not going to feel good. And so sex is also context dependent, meaning this everything has got to be lined up the right way. So it's got to be the right combination of physical cues, emotional like connection cues, but also mental cues. Are we mentally prepared to have sex? And when stress is high, like what's going on right now, it's really hard to get in the mood that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let's speak into the mindset behind it, right? Can you share with us how do you mentally prepare yourself for these things?
Sure. So I think when you think about libido or that desire, so that's another, desire is another word for libido, we mistake it for the idea of arousal. So if we separate it as two different things, desire is the wanting to have sex, and arousal is the physical response of our body ready to have it. So you need the combination of both. You can't just have one or the other. But the challenge is when we have too much stress, sometimes that desire piece is missing, right? Like we can't get our mind into it because we're overtired or overstressed. And so we miss out on that piece. So then the arousal never happens, right? So that's the challenge there, to make sure that, okay, how do we prioritize that mental piece in order to get into the mood? And so, one of the things that I really like women to think about in terms of a mindset thing is, do you even consider yourself a woman who likes sex? So yeah, I was chatting with you before our call about this example. So if I'm a runner, okay, if I am a runner, I like to run. I am on Pinterest looking at different boards about running. I may be researching running gear. I plan it into my day. I know where I'm going to run. I plan when I'm going to be eating my food and how I can have enough energy to make sure that I'm good to go for my run, because it's important to me. I would identify myself as a runner. Now, if I'm not a runner, but I want to become a runner, but I dread it every single time, I feel guilty if I don't go, or I only go because I feel guilty that I should be going. If I
Right.
if I can't even bring myself to go and do it, if it's like my to-do list ends up so big that I have no energy to go for a run, so I don't do it today, I'll do it tomorrow, then I don't identify as a runner. And being a sexual woman is the same thing. If we don't identify as a woman who likes sex, then we don't prioritize it. We don't think of ourselves as sexual. We don't make time for it. We don't
Mhm.
adjust how we respond to the day-to-day stimulus around us with the mindset of, hey, if I like sex, then I know that I've got to make sure that I have enough time at the end of my day to unwind. I can't just simply go from washing the dishes, managing the house and everything to boom, being ready, if I know that I need to be in the mood and I need to prioritize that. So thinking of ourselves and really asking yourself, what does it look like for you to say, I'm a woman who likes sex? What does it even look like to say that? How would you respond if that was your identity? So that's, I think, a really big thing to think about.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I like, so for me, coming from a very religious background where we didn't have premarital sex, I was a virgin when I got married. It was, and it is a taboo topic to say things like, oh, I like sex. Oh, I enjoy it. I prioritize it. And, I think we're kind of in this transition phase where we're going from maybe some old school, you know, things to more of this, like, okay, now it's more acceptable to talk about and things like that. And so I feel like we're somewhere in that transition of opening those lines of communication, and that's why I really wanted to have you on here, because I want to open up those channels, and I think we can talk about these things in a way that is supportive to women, without making it taboo, or letting women know that it's normal to have these feelings, to want to be with your spouse, to want to be with your partner. Um, let's talk about the connection between your hormones now. So we have this mindset piece. Let's talk about the sex hormones and the desirability of being intimate. What is that connection, and how do we connect the two? How do we overcome those obstacles if we are saying, oh, it's my hormones?
Well, I think it's important to understand that Sex has a lot of health benefits, right? Like there are benefits to our circulation, to our heart. It's great for our pelvic floor muscles, which give us the bladder control, bladder lift, bladder support. They also support our core and our abdominal muscles and everything like that. So it goes beyond just the physical pleasure of it. And but pleasure is good. Like we want pleasure. We're supposed to enjoy it, right? Like it's meant to be enjoyed. But sex has all these other benefits in terms of mood, better sleep, better stress management. So it's important to recognize that it itself is a health marker, right? Like I think we tend to think of heart health, brain health, etc., but we don't think sexual health. So it is important to understand that it is something that is part of who we are as an individual, right? And so from that perspective, hormones are a huge factor. So I was already saying, like when our stress hormones are really high, we're not going to be manufacturing the right kind of female sex hormones. But over
Mhm.
the course of our life, our hormones are doing one of these, right? Like there are
Yeah.
ebbs and flows that go with it, right? And so it can be a phase of life, whether that's pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding, perimenopause, menopause. But even in between those phases, we can still have issues. Like in your community, you have lots of individuals with thyroid issues and how that impacts all of that. When we don't have enough of the female sex hormones, we're going to experience all kinds of issues. So, first of all, physically, the tissues are going to be drier, they're going to be thinner. So, it's going to feel tight, maybe burning with sex. And simply putting more lube is not enough, right? Like you can put a whole bottle down there, and it's not going to make it any better if the tissue is itself dry. I use the example of these lips. If my
Yeah.
lips are really dry, I can lick them, right? Like I can lick them and they temporarily are moistened, but they're not really moisturized, right? And
Mhm.
so we want to make sure that, but if I put lip balm on, then now they're moisturized. So the same thing can happen vaginally. If we have a lot of this dryness, that can occur with some hormone issues. But also we don't create like the wetness for slide and glide and for any kind of penetration or intimacy when our hormones are not at the right level. And then finally, these hormones are responsible for the bulk of the muscles. And so, yes, down in the vulva and the vagina, there are muscles there, and they're responsible for giving us some sensation down there, but also things like orgasm. So when we don't have the right sex hormones, it can be harder to have an orgasm, or maybe it's like a little orgasm, like it just doesn't really happen, because those are all signs that we need to really adjust the hormone piece along with the mindset piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you shared that with us because I think sometimes we forget that they're two separate things. Um, what about, I'm looking at my notes that I made.
Yeah.
So what desirability? Yep. How do we, can you share with us maybe some things that we can do to enhance the lubrication down there, enhance the tissue? Like how do we go from, that's what I want to talk about, the arousal phase and the desirability. Like how, okay, so now we have this desire to be intimate. How do we go from, okay, yeah, I want this, to like the actual getting ready and preparing and being able to have that orgasm?
Yeah. So desire, so if we think of desire here and arousal here, they feed each other, right? And so the more desire we have, the more turned on we are and our body responds. The more that happens, the more we think about sex. So it goes around in a loop, right? So they both feed one another. So and you don't have to have both in order to get going, right? Like, so sometimes we have like our body's responding, we don't really feel like it, but then as we get going, it's like, oh, now I'm into it, right? Like, so it's one of those kinds of things. Our body is always responding to both aspects. But in terms of how do you sort of get that arousal piece, like physically, so for sure, from a mindset standpoint, making sure that you recognize when are you better. Like if you are saying that this intimate part of my relationship is a priority and I want to be able to put that time in there, but I know that I have zero energy at the end of the day, then how can I make this something that happens in the morning or maybe in the middle of the day? Kids are napping or something. So recognizing that I think is really big, because when we have these positive sexual experiences, our brain remembers that, right? And so then that just makes it that much easier the next time. And then from a tissue, like a vaginal perspective, if I was to say one thing, one recommendation, and this is probably going to be like, what? to stop using soap and cleanser down there. That's the one thing I would say, okay? Because
Okay. Yeah.
as women, we tend to experience a lot of vaginal dryness. It's the biggest issue that women come to see me about because of hormonal issues. And we create natural lubrications and everything. And if you start using all kinds of soaps and cleansers, like if I use that same kind of body wash on my face would feel so tight. And the same thing happens down there. So we need to minimize all of that harsh stuff so that we are not stripping away all of that. We tend to feel like we need to be clean. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or the way we're brought up, and we just aggressively clean down there. And so I think that's one of the things that contributes to a lot of dryness that we can really make a difference with ourselves. So
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And thank you for that, because I know for myself, like I want to feel, I want to feel clean. I want to feel fresh. And I remember a while ago, I was reading on Facebook, there was a hilarious post where she was going into her gynecologist and, making sure she was well groomed, and ended up spraying stuff on there and didn't realize that it was full of glitter. And
glitter,
so
yes.
when her gynecologist was doing an exam, she's, all sparkly, and just the post was hilarious. I laughed for days, and I had not that it means anything to my husband. I shared it with him and he was like, okay,
Whatever.
like he didn't get why it was so funny. But I think we as women want to identify with smelling good, smelling fresh, being well groomed and taken care of. And
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. And I think, you know, I could talk for hours on the whole, like our culture of feminine hygiene. If you see those aisles in the drugstore and things like that, like, I think we don't need to be as worried about it as we are. And I think when we are healthy, our body regulates a little bit. So in the beginning, when you don't use a lot of soap, you're going to feel like I'm sweaty and all that kind of stuff. But we tend to not manufacture all of the oils and odor if you're not stripping it all away,
yes,
So, yeah.
yes. Well, and just to kind of speak into the smelling portion of it, is that could be a sign that our hormones are out of balance, that the body needs to detoxify and things like that if there is a strong odor, which we don't have to get into today with that. But that, I just wanted to bring that up for you women who are like, but, So let's talk about communication with your spouse, right? So we have this desire. Now we're trying to get into this arousal phase. How do we communicate with our spouse effectively of communicating our needs, right? This
Yeah.
is what I need from you. This is, and not just from like a sexual standpoint, but from like an emotional standpoint, or, all of those connective pieces.
Yeah, for sure. So if we think of desire, I often will use the analogy that desire is kind of like a car engine. It's got brakes and accelerators. So
Mm-hmm.
things that get us in the mood are accelerators, and things that get us out of the mood or are mood killers are the brakes. And we want to minimize the brakes. The research shows that minimizing the brakes is the most important for getting positive sexual experiences. And so communicating with our partner, not just about like, never mind just in the bedroom, but even to communicate that when I have to make dinner, wash all the dishes, get all the laundry done, then all the house cleaning done, like I have nothing left. So I really
Yeah.
believe that our partners, if they thought that they could do something to get us more in the mood, as in, I'll wash the dishes and I'll clean up after dinner, they would do it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if
Oh
they
yeah.
don't, but if they don't know that that is one of the things. So again, if you identify as a woman who likes sex, how do you preserve the time? If I say, okay, I enjoy sex and I like having sex in the evening, and I need to have an hour or two to unwind before I go to bed, how can I tell my partner that I need that time? So, what can they help with, for example, and share so that I'm able to do that? Because it's mutually beneficial for both of us, right? If that
Yeah.
happens. So, that's one of the things. So, recognizing that. But I think if we go back even further, it's giving yourself permission to ask, because I think that is a big piece of it. We feel like we should be like the women we see on TV. that, our partner gives us one of these,
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
of a sudden, woo, my clothes are falling off, right? Like I'm ready, it doesn't happen that way for us. So acknowledging that it's okay, because very few women, the majority of women, do not experience desire at the drop of a hat. It is something that is very context dependent on how they're feeling, the relationship with their partner, what's going on, everything that's happening around them too. So managing those things, and that's where the communication is letting our partner know that I want to do this, but these are the things that I think would be helpful for me in order to be more in a good mindset in order to have sex tonight, or maybe not tonight, but on night, right? Like in order to have that, so that I'm not feeling like this is the grocery list. And then what about Susie's homework? And what about the laundry that's got to be done? And I got to make these phone calls. So to get some of that off of your plate and share, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my husband and I, we use this analogy, and I don't know, it was somebody shared it with him when we were like engaged, right? And we're in this process of like getting ready to get married and, all of the things. And they said, the guy told him that women are like crock pots. They take a while to warm up and to cook the food and things. And so you have to, so we call it like plugging it in. So he'll come home and he'll kiss me and he'll give me a hug, and, he'll help with dinner and things. And, he'll look at me and give me that like, little winky, whatever. And he's like, I'm just plugging it in. And I'm like, okay, I got it.
No, but it's so true, right? It's so true. And it's being okay to acknowledge that that's what I need, right? And giving yourself permission, because I think as women, we often don't give ourselves that permission. We think that it shouldn't be like that, and we beat ourselves up that we need that time, but the truth is the majority of women are like that. The majority of women need this. Yeah. So it's okay to then ask for whatever it takes to plug it in, so yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And even
And
like, so even as in the bed, like in the bedroom, making sure that you're communicating if you need more time there too, right? Because again, depending on what the style of your intimate relationship has been like in the past, if it's very quick, if there's not a lot of foreplay, sometimes our body doesn't respond the same way. And especially like I deal with a lot of women as they're approaching perimenopause, our bodies change that way as we get a little bit older, right? And so allowing your body that time to respond, and again, not beating myself up that it's like that, but communicating that, hey, I need a little extra time, go a little slower, so that my body can catch up.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I think communication in the bedroom is one of the most important things that we can do. Hey, go do that in the other room. I have kids, in case anybody is curious. We're homeschooling, so I feel like life is just a little different, right? Hey, please go. Hey, I'm serious. Please go play the whistle in the other room, okay? Or just wait. She's like, I'm not blowing it. Okay. What were we talking about?
Communication.
Communication. Yes, communicating in any way. We were at a girls' night and we were talking about a few things, and one of the ladies was like, my husband takes an hour and I'm just ready for it to be over, And so, but he's trying to meet her needs, right? Yeah. He's trying to make sure that the foreplay is there, that she's ready, that it's a good experience. And maybe you need to communicate and just say, hey, like, I want to go to bed, like,
Yep.
So whatever that communication is, hey, I need more time, or hey, I like, help me get there, quicker tonight, because I'm ready for bed. It's midnight and, I'm there, but, whatever that communication is. And I think opening up that communication of, hey, that feels really good. And like you were saying, spend a little bit more time there, right? Because there's different feelings, different sensations for men and women, and opening that up. I think my husband appreciates that when I communicate that with him.
Oh my gosh, yes.
because
I
they
think,
want to do a
yeah.
good job.
Well, I think so many guys, if they knew, if you tell me what to do, that you will like it, I will do it, right? Like, so I think, and not every man is like that, and not every woman is like that. Like, I get, like, we're speaking in general terms here.
Yes.
But again, really, I think we make it better all around, because if they're wanting to please, if they're wanting to make it a good experience for you, but they don't know, they can't read your mind. And sometimes reading the signals is hard, right? So owning that it's okay to communicate. And I think a lot of times women, we struggle with that. We feel bad saying something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Especially the women that I work with, I feel like when we have problems with our thyroid, it makes it just a little bit harder to open up and to communicate those things. So let's just leave these people. This has been amazing, but I want to leave everybody with some tips and resources. So if you're struggling with hormone imbalances, if you're struggling to get there, what can they do to help enhance that?
So I think recognizing that the piece with sex is one other health marker. So, if your hormones are not balanced, if we're not eating well, if we're not sleeping, if we're not prioritizing the right kind of movement for ourselves and stress management, this is not going to fall into place. So it's no different than any other aspect of your health. So I think going back to the basics and making sure that you are doing the things that are necessary for good health. So a lot of the stuff that you're giving to your group and talking about the right kinds of foods, the right kinds of movements, not the stuff that's depleting, not punishing ourselves with exercise, but being active, being healthy. Those are the biggest things to boost our sexual arousal, desire, the whole bit, for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. And I know you have a guide for everyone, which I actually just dropped the link in the comment box. So do you want to tell them a little bit about like what it's called? So I see that it's called the 3 ways to help alleviate embarrassing bladder issues, but
Oh,
it's not just that, right?
no, I'm sorry that that's what it's saying. I feel like that's not the
Well,
right.
the link, it may not have been updated for like
Oh,
the, I don't know what that's called, but it is, so it says a mood guide. So tell us,
okay.
I guess, yeah,
All
tell us
right.
what
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Yes. So it
you're
is
good.
a mood guide. Yes. So it's got 3 tips to help improve our libido. So it's called My Get in the Mood Guide. And in it, I talk about some of the stuff that we've discussed today, why it's important to look sort of holistically. I've got a couple of great food tips that are big, sort of, I don't want to say aphrodisiacs, but they are libido boosters. They make our tissues a bit more plumped up and soft. They really help with the right kinds of oils and things like that in our diet to make sure that we are aroused and ready. I also talk about exercise and the right kind of exercise to get our heart rate up a little bit, again, to get that stimulation going, which also stimulates the tissues in the vulva and the vagina. And then the last one is talking about how do we decompress our mind in order to get rid of some of the other things that are crowding out the desire and the response to any kind of sexual kind of nudges and everything like that.
Amazing. That sounds awesome. So you guys can download that. The link is there for you. And how can they get in touch with you? How can they follow you and learn more about you and all of those things?
Yeah, so I've got a Facebook group called Women's Health Community, and I talk to women about all of these issues. So issues related to anything below the waist. So bladder control, issues with sex, from libido to pain, dryness, tightness. And so that's the kind of stuff that we look at so that women can have better bladder control and a great sex life.
Amazing. I am so excited. So thank you so much for being here. I've enjoyed this talk. I feel like
This
I
is great.
learned a few things myself and just, and re-solidifying, having that communication, the importance of desirability and, that connection of the mindset behind it. So thank you so much. I hope everybody has a fantastic night and we will see you